Tim Foley, 165 DeWindt Road. Again, thank you for letting me be here tonight. Thank you for having this on the agenda tonight. You may recall me from the last meeting that we had just before the storm, actually. Again, appreciate that this is now been moved to the highest priority on your list. Unfortunately, it brought a 7-inch rain to get us here tonight, and the sense of urgency that we had. We've been kind of looking at this since 2009. I want to thank Gene Grable. He did a call from one of our residents, came and visited our street, and he did that right up at storm on Saturday. Thank you so much for coming. Jenny Spinning.
With boots.
With boots, very high boots, gators. Also want to thank Jenny Spinning. I know she visited the area, and there may have been some of the trustees that walked in the area. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it. We got, I think, the full impact of what we saw. I'd like to report basically on our street, DeWindt Road. By the way, I'm the president of the DeWindt Road Association. So I'd like to report on our street that we had an overwhelming backup of water, and that basically backed up through our pumping station, submerged our pumps, and essentially knocked out our pumps. There was really nothing that we could do. So when the water submerged our pump, by the way, the pump we had just replaced the pump. It cost us about $10,000 the night before, at 4 p.m. the night before on Friday night. We just put in brand new pumps to our pumping station. But because of the lack of the ability to drain the water somewhere else down the line, the water backed up into our pump station, over our pump station, and basically knocked it out. So we were without basically the ability to drain an entire area of, Winnetka. It's a fairly large area. It caused about 30 inches of rain in the middle of our streets, which is what Gene's referring to when he talks about with the boots. And essentially we had, I think, I'm not sure, we don't have necessarily scientific recording here, but we had probably the highest water levels, I think, of anywhere in Winnetka, if I'm not mistaken. I suspect the backyard, but in the middle of our street, essentially 30 inches of water. It caused about $30,000 worth of damage to our pumping station alone that day. And we needed Project Plumbing, who I'd like to thank for the men to come. They installed essentially 3 external pumps, which we used because we couldn't use our own pumping station, to essentially pump out from Saturday morning for 36 hours straight until Sunday evening, all the water that was in our pumping station, just so we could get our pumps, well, the water below our pumps, so we could then pump like we normally do. Of the 28 homes on our road, about half of them had flooding in their basement. Almost all of the homes on our road had flooding in their properties, and flooding is somewhat of an understatement, as Gene and others may have seen. We had no mail delivery, we had no FedEx delivery, we had very little passage from our homes in a car. One car which tried to make it through the road got stuck in the middle of the road because there was so much water. Many residents of the town sustained a lot of damage, and my condolences to all of them. I know that basically, if you drove down Glendale Avenue, Cherry, Ash, Oak, you saw do not enter signs there, which again, as I mentioned in the last meeting, is really not something that we want to see in our village when we have a rainstorm. We talked about real estate appreciation, we talked about real estate prices, we talked about the perception outside of the village, driving down streets, being on TV, seeing cable networks covering our town is really not something that we want to have happen, certainly not something we want to have happen on DeWindt Road. So essentially, we had to have a manual pumping of our station all night long. No one came by our area. Steve, I appreciate all the help. I know we are a private street, but no one came to our homes and our area. And we basically, again, are subject to what the rest of Winnetka does because we pump into the system. And if the system gets backed up and backs up over our pumping station, we're out of luck. We have no village help. We have nothing there for us. And so essentially we're on our own. But again, we're only as good as the bigger picture. What we have here is really not a problem with some pumps. It's really a record rainfall. And while clearly we couldn't save every home, no matter what was designed, if we had gone with the system that the Christopher Burke folks had come up with, we know we were designing it for a certain level of rain. We couldn't have saved every home. But we could have saved many homes. We could have saved the disaster that we had here. If you look at the problem that I know we talked about since 2009, it's really not an issue of trying to store all the water because we know we can't do that. It's an issue of storing water and moving water. And so the issue here is we need to keep the water moving, which is basically what we had. You had this pumping station failed on Ash, as the pumping station failed at DeWindt, we couldn't move the water. So when the water can't be moved, then the water collects, and the water just continues to back up. I know there are homes in our area that had up to 11 feet of water in their basement. We didn't, luckily, on our street, but I know that there were some others that did. I mentioned in 2009, because I was here in February of 2009, that when the rains come, because I was asked, why aren't there more people here? And I was essentially the lone soldier that night. And I said, when the rains come, the people will come. Well, here they are. This is really an issue we talked about in the past of dealing with in some implementing the plan, the Cook County Forest Reserve, the school, the Park District, a number of these groups getting together to kind of try to influence some of these things. What I would suggest to you, what our brethren in Washington, D.C. have just learned, is we're all one. We need to work together as one, to not think of ourselves as a bureaucracy of 3 or 4 different spots, but one group trying to solve a problem together. Because I would ask you, as we're going to be doing a cost-benefit analysis of the first study in the 8 particular areas that we studied, what about the cost-benefit now? What about having all the village trucks going out and picking up the refuge? What about all the monies that we've now spent in trying to resolve and clean up from this mess, that we maybe could have avoided some of that? So my issue here and my goal here is not necessarily to scold, but my issue here is to say, I'm glad that we have a sense of urgency. I'm sorry that we had a 7-inch rain to get us to this point. And what I would suggest to you is that it is a combination of a number of things: moving water, storing water, working with the various bureaucracies that we've got to kind of get this done, and get it done as soon as we possibly can, because even tonight, another rain lingers, and like I said before, what other issue could the village trustees have in front of it which could be more important that does not affect every resident of the village? So thanks so much.